What I do is I identify franchises for people based on their goals, their skill set, and their investment level. Now, what's great is it is a free service because I'm paid by franchisors in order to bring them quality people that are a good match for their brand. Now, some of the questions that I talk about with candidates is real estate. And there's a number of things that come up in the process, but I thought it'd be really helpful to have an experienced real estate agent on and go through some questions that I get and some helpful information, even if you're not interested in franchising, just as a new home buyer, that would be helpful. So, Bryan, if you wouldn't mind going ahead and introducing yourself, and we'll go
Yeah,
from there.
thanks for having me, Lydia. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I'm Bryan McWhite. I have been a residential real estate agent, real estate investor, real estate coach for 13 years full time now. Um, and live and work in the Maple Grove and Rogers area often, but my kind of career has covered the entire city. I always tell people if you want to know what my area is or where I've sold homes, just drop a big splat of paint right on downtown Minneapolis, and everywhere it goes is probably somewhere I've sold a home. So yeah, I love it. I'm married to Laura. I've got a big, beautiful blended family of 7 kids with her.
Why don't we start and you talk a little bit about how you got into real estate, and then we'll start getting into some of the questions too.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I really got into real estate by accident. I spent the first half of my kind of adult career as a pastor or in ministry of some kind. And after leaving that, kind of wasn't sure what I might do. I loved obviously connecting with people. I loved communicating, but wasn't sure what that added up to. And a good friend of mine was starting a real estate team. I had actually done his wedding and married him to his wife when I was a pastor. And they were starting a real estate team and wanted to bring on people who weren't from the real estate industry, but who had, skill sets that would be useful in the real estate industry, and invited me to interview. And I said, no, thank you. Actually, at that point, I didn't really have much interest in real estate and didn't have a super high opinion of real estate agents, actually. But they talked a lot about how they wanted to do good in the lives of people and really be a place that put customers first and really gave them great experiences. I was really intrigued. And so, long story short, I got into it that way and have been doing it full time for 13 years now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing that. So the first question, and it kind of starts with our story, Bryan. I think I told you a little bit about
Yeah.
it, is Mike and I became franchise owners first before we became home owners. And so we did it a little backwards than most people do, the route that people go. And so we found it was a little bit more of a challenge to be a business owner and apply for a mortgage. And I was very frustrated
Yeah.
by it, even still thinking about it. Like, this doesn't make any sense. The
Hmm.
rules, how they're written, but they are the rules. I don't make them.
Yeah.
But do you want to talk a little bit more first about, what needs to be considered as business owners when you're looking at buying a home for the first time?
Yeah. So let me guess, you ran into problems with debt to income ratio, you ran into problems with provable income, things like that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very, very common. Lenders love W-2 and none of us are W-2, right? And so when we're not W-2, they don't trust us. And so they often want to see 12 or 24 months often of income to be able to use as qualifying um, for what they approve you for, right? And also, SBA loans most of the time require a personal guarantee, so those are going to be counted against you as debt as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that can create a lot of hurdles. So, what I tell people is, look, if that ship has already sailed, if you have already purchased your business and now you want to buy a home, well, still the best possible thing you can do is talk to a great lender, and any good realtor can connect you with a great lender who really understands how these things can interact. And they have lots of different loan products, and there's almost certainly a way to get you a house. But if you can, try to put the horse before the cart and purchase a home and then buy the business. That'll be a lot easier way to do it. But obviously, it's not always that simple. I mean, I'm sure when you guys were buying, you really had to think about location and where do I anticipate this business going? And, that
Absolutely.
makes it
All of those
tricky.
Yeah, all of those factors were considered, and making sure that we had a large down payment too was the thing that we needed to consider.
Yeah.
But we planned for it, and it did work out. We owned the business for a year, and we made it work. And a week later, our first child was born, so we got in right in the nick of time. Uh,
Yeah.
so the next question, we've been talking, Brian, more just as buying a new home with new construction, but just your wealth of knowledge, and how detailed you are, I really appreciate. So what are the common mistakes that first time home buyers make, or really common mistakes people make when buying a home in general?
Yeah. Mistakes buyers commonly make. Obviously, there's, you know, if you asked me for the most common mistakes that new construction buyers make, that'd be one thing, or first time home buyers make, that'd be one thing. I mean, it really depends on the scenario, but okay, this is going to sound like a really self-serving answer, but it's the truth. Um, First of all, not using the right real estate professional. I think that a lot of people work with someone that they know and like, right? And that's it. But we're in sales, and we know that you really want to work with people that you know, like, and trust. And you have to have some way of trusting that they're going to do a really great job for you. And so I think buyers ought to do a little more diligence on finding a realtor who they really believe they trust, because someone else they trust trusts them. So I think that's one of them. Also, a lot of buyers want to put, I'm using this analogy again, the cart before the horse, in that they don't want to go through the pre-approval process before they start looking and getting excited and seeing houses and trying to find a realtor who will show them houses. The smartest thing to do is always to get your pre-approval squared away with a really good lender really early on. Because what you don't want to have happen is, you don't want to say, I'm pretty sure we can buy a $500,000 house, so let's go shopping. Oh, I like this one. Oh, I like that one. And then you actually get down to pre-approval and you talk to your lender and find out that your monthly payment on that house is higher than you were anticipating. And, then all of a sudden you got to backtrack. And so I think talking to a really experienced professional lender early on is one of the things that I think buyers can kind of skip sometimes. Obviously in the last few years, skipping inspections has become a thing. Particularly in the post-COVID market. I mean, people were skipping inspections to get the house they want, and often skipping them on new construction as well. And that landed a lot of people in trouble. And you just have to remember that this is where realtor experience and real estate agent integrity comes in that I want to make sure that you are getting into the right situation for you at the right time. So yeah, I feel like that's I do not want people putting themselves in a bad situation just because it means a closing for me, right?
Right.
I want to make sure. I have never had a client skip an inspection, and I think that's a really important piece of the puzzle too, that buyers don't try so hard to get the house they really want that they then put themselves in a bad position, because it is coming back to bite some of them.
Yeah. No,
I can go on and on
absolutely.
with that.
Yeah, and it's a home they're supposed to be in, for the next 10, well, I don't know what the average is now, but 10, 15 years, I think maybe.
Honestly, less, 5 to
Sometimes
7
longer.
years. But even in
5,
that
7.
time, significant problems can come up.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And there's so it's so funny, Brian, you're talking about making sure that, you're going into the home and you've done an inspection. It's very similar to buying a franchise I have people that they start to look at concepts, and in a week and they're like, oh, I'm ready. And then I go, no, you're not. You have
Yeah.
way more questions to ask. You have P&Ls to build. You need to make sure that you have the right funding in place too. And we talk about pre-approval too, is you don't want to get excited about a franchise and then it's not going to be a good fit and it's way out of your budget. You're not going to be comfortable with that. So
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
How much, of course, people know probably about the 20% rule, but how much do people really need for a down payment?
Yeah, I think that's a common misconception, that you need 20% down to purchase a home. That's not true at all. Conventional mortgages, typically you need about 5% down, but there's even programs where it's as low as 3%. There's all kinds of new first-time homebuyer incentives too. I recently spoke with a lender who had a 3% down conventional loan product, and the lender did a 3% closing costs match. So it was essentially a 0% down conventional loan. So there's lots of different options. I'd say that the most common is 5% down. There's also FHA loans where you can do 3.5% down, although that gives you some restrictions. And then, of course, if you have veteran benefits, or if your family does, there are 0% down VA loans available too. So there's lots of different options. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Wonderful.
Yeah.
How long is a typical home search to make sure you're finding the right home? How long should it take?
Yeah. I'm curious how long yours took, ballpark.
Not long. It should have taken longer. So,
Okay. Well,
um, say a couple weeks it took. To find the right home, it was a couple weeks. But I mean, we should have been thinking about it way longer than we were planning. But new baby coming, we needed more room. So
Yeah,
sped
of
things
course, I
up.
get it. Again, there's not really a typical, because I've got clients who are shopping or possibly building $3 or $4 million properties on Lake Minnetonka. I've got people who are shopping for a 225K townhome investment property. But then there's this big chunk of people in the middle who are shopping for 400 to 800K properties. Okay, so let's just take them as an example. I would say that your experience is pretty common. It's rare that I'm showing people more than 8 or 12 properties before they find one that they want to make a move on. Now that's there's a huge assumption there, though. If I, as your real estate agent, aren't providing value to you by really helping you refine your search and making sure that every property that we look at is a serious candidate, well, then of course we're going to spend 3 months doing it and see 40 homes and be exhausted at the end of all of it, of course. So part of my process is helping people get super laser focused on their wants, their needs, asking good questions that help them figure out exactly what they're looking for. Because so often during those conversations, people say, I never would have thought of that. And I say, yeah, and that's a big part of your enjoyment or non-enjoyment of this house. So if I can get them laser focused on what we're looking for, then typically we're going to see 8 or 12 properties in the span of 2 or 3 weeks, and we're going to find a great place for them.
Got it. Makes sense.
Yeah, but I mean, on the other hand, like I said, the Lake Minnetonka folks, that might be a 2-year process.
Right.
The people who kind of have an eye out for investment properties for, it could be a month because one pops up. It could be 3 years.
Yeah, that makes sense. How many clients do you work with at one time, Bryan?
Yeah, I mean, on average, I work with 2 or 3 clients a month. But of course, in Minnesota, it depends on the month. So, I tend to be very busy February to July, let's say, and then it kind of slowly trickles off into the winter. So, I might have 5 or, in the spring, I might have 3 or 4 home listings going at a time and a couple of buyers. And, this time of year, I'm going to have a few buyers who are sort of looking now, maybe now, maybe spring, and then a listing here and there. So
Got it.
I don't let myself get so busy that I can't provide great service. That's the most important thing to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something we learned too, is how detailed you are. So I was wondering what is that bandwidth can't be too big.
Yeah. And I should do a better job of hiring some things that I don't need to be spending time on. But I'm not going to, it is hard.
Yeah. So let's switch and talk a little bit more about sellers. So sometimes I have people who they find the right franchise. It's the perfect match. They couldn't imagine doing it any other franchise, but it's sold out in their market. And so they have to move. So what are some things that those people should consider? And, should they sell their house before? Should they buy? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, there's a lot of different factors at play there, particularly in terms of how the person's business finances are going to work, right? Maybe you need to sell that house to have funds to put toward your business or whatever else, and sometimes if they're moving to a new area and I assume that it happens sometimes that someone moves to a new area, starts a franchise, and it doesn't pan out, right? And so sometimes I do think it probably makes more sense to rent in your area and really see where the business is going to go, and then you can purchase. I don't think renting is a bad thing. I think that home ownership in the long term is one of the smartest financial investments you can make, but that doesn't mean you need to own a home at all times, right? That said, if you are going to buy a home where you're moving, then in most cases you're going to need to sell your previous home in order to have the proceeds to purchase that new home, unless you happen to be in a financial position where you can qualify to have both mortgages at the same time. If you can qualify to have both mortgages at the same time and have your SBA loan or whatever, great. Then you have the flexibility to buy whatever you want on whatever timeline you want, and then sell your property on whatever timeline you want, just knowing that you're going to have the holding costs for two properties at the same time, right?
Yep.
But you know, any good real estate agent is going to be able to help you sell your home and buy a property at the same time, and make sure that that timing works out so that you don't have overlapping, owning two homes at the same time, and not having to hopefully, you know, have a hotel room for a week and your stuff in storage for a week between homes. It's pretty typical that, you know, a seller is going to close on their home in the morning and close on their new property in the afternoon. And I would guess in most situations, that's going to be the right way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. But budgeting and all of that is important to figure out what that's going to look like.
Yeah, of course. And honestly, you know, sometimes home ownership is cheaper per month than what you can rent. I mean, oftentimes that's the case. It's just a matter of whether your financial situation is right to be carrying the mortgage, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
Definitely. Another question is, you know, what should people look for when choosing a real estate agent? We talked a little bit about it, but what should they really be, what questions, I guess, should they be asking to make sure that they're finding the right one versus just someone that they know, someone's used before? What questions?
Yeah. It's unfortunate that in my industry, you know, we have not done a very good job communicating what the difference is between agents, you know. Is there a difference between me and your friend's niece who got licensed last week? I mean, I was a brand new agent once too. We all were. So I'm not saying that no one should work with that person. But if you're asking the question, you know, what should you look for in an agent? Just knowing the industry from the inside as well as I do, you know, I try to think about, okay, if I didn't know what I know, what advice would I give myself? If I'm looking for an agent, what would I want? Well, now I would really want someone, first of all, like I said before, that's someone who I trusts. You know, that's ideal. Someone who's already had a good experience with the person. And if you can't get that and you're interested in working with someone, there is nothing wrong with asking them for references. After all, you're hiring them and you're going to pay them a chunk of money. And so there's, you know, any good realtor should be able to say, would you like, you know, 3 weeks ago, I had a first-time home buyer who asked me for references. And I said, I can send you 3 random people if you want. You know I'm going to pick ones I like. Or I can send you I can check with the last 3 first-time home buyers I worked with. Just the last 3. And you can ask them about their experience. And that's what I said. I checked with them, and that's what I sent them. So that's part of the, you know, someone who you trusts. I think that's a really good place to start. Outside of that, I think that experience matters almost more than anything. Integrity matters, but it's hard to tell. It's hard to tell about integrity until you have someone you trusts. But experience is a big deal. Real estate, just like anything else, the more reps you have, the better you get. The more situations you've encountered, the more problems you've solved, the more last-minute rabbits you've pulled out of a hat to fix a problem that someone created in the deal. All of those things combine to knowing how best to give consumers a stress-free, headache-free process as much as possible, solve problems around the way, clear hurdles along the way, and hopefully save them a lot of money too, right? So I think experience is a huge piece of it. So like I said, I've been in the market for 13 years full time now. I've done over 700 transactions. So there just isn't much I haven't run into yet. And I think that one other thing to look for is just a realtor who has, and this kind of goes along with experience, but a realtor who has local knowledge. You know, having had, you know, either living in an area or having had experience in the area that you're interested in before, I think that's a really big deal as well, because every city, every suburb, every neighborhood is a little bit different. And so, you know, having an agent who has been around and who has worked in those areas, I think is an important piece too.
Yeah. Yeah. And that really ties into the next question, which is, you know, what sets you apart, Bryan? And it is from what I've experienced, the level of detail, the questions that you do ask, is pretty amazing. But anything that, and I also think just your servant's heart too. That's what I've seen is really, really wonderful to work with someone like that.
Thank you.
But what else would you say?
Yeah. Well, and you haven't even heard my questions for, you know, for buying yet. At some point, I'm going to barrage you with questions, so I make sure that I really zero in on what you guys might be interested in some point. What sets me apart? Okay, well, I already talked about experience. I do think that that's a really big piece of the puzzle. When you are hiring me versus hiring, I'm not even going to say any other agent. When you're hiring me now versus hiring me 13 years ago, you're paying the same. You're getting 700 more reps versus worth of experience.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big deal. But okay, thank you for what you said about servant-heartedness. Like I said, I was a pastor for a long time before I got into this work. And I think I'm kind of wired as a pastor. And so I think that my clients appreciate that I do try to bring, I'll just call it a pastoral touch to my work. And you know, what I mean by that is I really care about the life events that people are experiencing that are prompting a move, because they're all over the map. You know, I talk to people who are moving or selling or buying because they're getting married, or they're having a baby, or kids moved out of the house and we're downsizing, or there's a divorce, or there's financial distress, or there's a death in the family. These are all significant life moments. You know, and some people do just buy houses because life is great and the job is going great, my business is exploding, I got all kinds of money, and now I can go get the lake house. That's a great thing to be a part of too. That's really exciting. But my point being, there's a lot of life events that factor into real estate moves. And I like bringing sort of that, I guess, that pastoral touch, that sort of sense of, we're going to do really, really good work on the real estate piece of this. And also, I'm going to add a human component that I think that you'll really appreciate. So I think those are probably the two biggest things.
Absolutely. And give people some peace as they do make the transition. So it's good.
Yeah. Yes. Well, and, you know, sometimes I joke, but I'm only half joking. The real estate and pastoral skill set, there's some similarities. And one of them is, as a pastor, you sometimes have to help people make smart decisions in the middle of very emotional circumstances. Guess what? In real estate, you have to help people make smart decisions in the middle of very emotional circumstances. And people can unknowingly sometimes lead with their emotions. And so I like that space too. I'm going to help you make really smart decisions, even though there's some emotion attached to this sale or this purchase. Yeah.
There absolutely is. And it's so funny. I was talking to two consultants at Brand Choice, is the art of making a decision. And there's a logical way to look at it, and then also an intuitive way, and making sure that you're really considering both of them.
Exactly. They need to be talking to each other.
Yep, they really do. Because sometimes we lead what feels natural. Mine, of course, is more intuitive. My husband is more logical, and you need both.
We're the same way.
Yeah, you need both, absolutely, to consider and make a well-informed decision. So, and not regret it later, which is good.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm hoping. I mean, I want to help people make such smart moves that there isn't regret in the rearview mirror, right? Because I want us to have a relationship for our whole lives. You know, I like to say that I want to be a real estate advisor for life, not just the guy who helps you get that house and then we never talk again.
Yeah, absolutely. And here how things are going. That's really good. The question I'm sure, Brian, you get all the time, but I have to bring it up in this,
Oh boy.
is what's the market like right now? What's it going to
Yeah.
look like for the next 6 to 12 months? Is it competitive? Is it a buyer's market? Is it a seller's market? I know you get that question all the time, but
Yeah,
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 too.
I love it. The crystal ball question. Let me just
Mm-hmm.
grab my crystal ball here. There we go. And I'll look in it. Yeah, the buyer's market has been well, not the buyer's market. The housing market has been an interesting space this year.
Mm-hmm.
It's been very slow. So what that means is that right now, and for the past 6 months or so, buyers have finally really had an opportunity to break through and get properties, especially buyers who might have tougher qualifications. They have been able to get properties in a way that they haven't been for the last 10 years. However, as most of us know now, the Fed is starting to lower interest rates. 10-year Treasury notes are still declining, which means
Mm-hmm.
that mortgage rates are likely to keep lowering. And there are millions of buyers who are just waiting for 6-ish% interest rates or lower. And they will get off the bench when that happens. And that will create a really busy, hot spring and probably late winter market. Every time mortgage interest rates go down a quarter of a point, two and a half, I'm sorry, every time that they go down a quarter of a point, 5.5 million more buyers nationwide can afford a median priced home. So I think that interest rates are going to go lower. I think that buyer activity is going to spike into the winter and spring, and it's going to be a really, really hot late winter and spring housing market. That's what my crystal ball says. So we'll
Yeah.
see how this ages.
Yeah, yeah, we'll see what happens. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, Brian, thank you so much for your time. I hope this was helpful for people as they are starting their entrepreneurial journey or if they've been on it for a while. But Brian, really appreciate your time.
Yeah. Thanks, Lydia. I really appreciate you having me.